What's the most dangerous job in Australia? Well, you may think construction, maybe shark baiters, or even soldiers. However, what would you think if I told you it was truck drivers? Well, according to recent research, it is indeed drivers, with around 1/3 of all workplace deaths occurring in the transport industry. And in to tell us more, in the studio now with me is Sam McIntosh, campaign coordinator with the Transport Workers Union, and Dave Beeching, an experienced truck driver who has been working for many, many years in the industry. So thank you very much, both of you, for joining me in the studio.
Thanks, Jared.
Now, I'll just start off. So 1/3 of all workplace deaths, that's quite massive. How many people is that per year? What are we talking about?
Well, Jared, what we've really got to look at is the total number of fatalities in the industry, and that, really importantly, in transport doesn't just include drivers. It's a tragedy that most people that are killed in truck crashes are actually mums, dads, sisters, brothers that are just driving cars. So 330 deaths a year in the transport industry. Yes, a lot of them are our drivers, but when you're driving a truck, more often than not, it's actually the commuter that is killed.
So it's dangerous not just for the workers, but for everyone who drives on Australian roads.
Absolutely. It's a huge concern for everyone that is on a road or near a road. 330 people on average a year, and that figure is not going down.
Now, what other alarming statistics did the report find?
Well, the report also focused on the number of injuries in the industry, and that, again, looks closely at the injuries that occur to drivers themselves. But once again, I really would emphasise that this report was only looking at what happens to drivers. Unfortunately, it's commuters as well, and those numbers increase exponentially when you look at the whole picture.
Now, I was quite astonished. I knew truck driving was a dangerous job, but I didn't realise it was the most dangerous job in Australia. So how did this situation come about?
It's the most dangerous job in Australia by a factor of 10, the most dangerous industry by a factor of 10. Look, this has come about through a tremendous squeeze that is put on the transport supply chain, and it all starts at the top. Big clients at the top, like Coles, put a tremendous amount of pressure on companies who in turn have to cut costs, and that affects their vehicles. So they cut costs on maintenance, brakes, wages, conditions, and that ultimately filters down to the driver. And when it gets down to the driver, I think we all know what the consequences are.
As we've seen recently in Adelaide with the brake failures from kind of cutting corners, like large companies cutting corners in maintenance. But kind of getting away from the statistics of the report, I guess I'm very interested in the personal side of it. So for you, Dave, upon hearing something like that, I'm sure it's not news to you, but does that make you anxious every time that you have to go to work?
Well, no, not really. It makes me angry more than anything else, because over the years you do come a little bit hardened to what happens on the road to you. But the fact that it's really so unnecessary, and it truly is unnecessary. If we could get some of these companies that would start paying a reasonable rate so that the companies we work for and the people we work for can afford to keep our trucks in good running order, it will be such... make it so much safer. And in some cases, like, you have a look around town. When you walk outside the studio, have a look around and have a look at the state of some of the trucks you see. Half the time, the trucks are older than the person driving them, for God's sake. I mean, that accident that happened on the bottom of the hill the other day, the truck was actually older than the poor lad driving it. He didn't have that much experience. He's sent out in an old truck with the exhaust pipe probably makes more noise than actually works. His brakes simply weren't up to the task, and he couldn't stop. Pure and simple. Not the lad's fault. It was the bloke who had to look after the truck. The bloke who sits behind the desk and writes out the cheque for the repairs, and basically gets it happening. I mean, and they've got to be accountable for it. They have to be.
And so that's kind of I mean, in the internet you mentioned it's someone behind a desk who may have never actually driven a truck themselves. It's a convenient way for them to, I guess, save money or make a bit more of a profit for the company that they work for.
Oh, absolutely. And some of these companies, particularly when you go on site or when you start with a new company, they basically get you to sign. It's a sort of a waiver of should you anything really happen to you on site, or if you haven't had the correct amount of sleep time and that sort of stuff. It's not our fault. It's your fault. Type scenario as well. There's no need for it. They've got to get their act together, and they've got to start being accountable for what they do. Historically, I've seen the police pull up drivers for decades now and fine drivers. Historically, that has not worked. It doesn't work because we've still got the same problems we had 20, 30 years ago. Now, if you turn around and you start finding that bloke who is in charge of the maintenance, and you start making him pay for it, and ultimately the company themselves pay for these problems and pay these fines that drivers actually have to pay, it would stop, because they simply wouldn't be able to afford to keep going with the revenue that the police rake out of the drivers. They should be raking it out of the companies that own the trucks and run the trucks and maintain them, not us.
And I imagine if they did that, there'd be reform quite quickly.
Oh, absolutely. Wouldn't it overnight? It would basically be overnight. It would have to.
Now, I can't even begin to imagine it's the amount of stress and pressure that you are under as a truck driver, but because of that, have you or any of your friends suffered any kind of accidents or any serious issues?
Oh, yes. I mean, most drivers will tell you a story of a mate that wasn't doing the right thing in order to try and keep up his time slots and that. There are some notorious roads. I mean, roads are a big thing. They're not as good as they used to be. Along with the maintenance issues, you've got to be able to stop. Personally, when I go to work, I don't care if the truck don't go, but I do care a lot if it don't stop.
Now, with statistics like that, 1 in 3 workplace or deaths in the transport industry, so why is then the Road Safety Remuneration Tribunal under threat, and what needs to be done to make sure it can do its job properly?
Well, Jared, quite simply, the Road Safety Remuneration Tribunal is the industry's watchdog. It was created by the Gillard government in 2012. Since that time, it has been progressing its work, looking closely at the industry, looking closely at major clients like Coles to see the impact that they have on the industry. But wouldn't you know it? As soon as the Abbott government came into power, they identified that they wanted to slash that tribunal with the support of Coles and other major industries that didn't like the idea of being, as Dave said, made accountable for the major role they play in this industry. And it's really as simple as that. This tribunal was set up to save lives. That's its sole purpose. And along the way, it is going to have to make clients accountable. It just has to. And I'm not shocked that there are big businesses that want to get rid of this tribunal, because we need to change the game. As Dave said, we need a circuit breaker, and this tribunal is it.
And I guess that's a good point you touched on there. Ultimately, it is, I mean, as this report finds, it's about lives. People are genuinely dying at quite high rates because of some major clients who just are wanting to cut a bit here, cut a bit there, and then Dave, you pay the price, or your friends and family pay the price. Oh, absolutely.
Yes, both in monetary value and in what happens to you personally. It's a bit hard to get too far into, because I have lost friends on the road. As I said, most drivers know people that do have. Financially, obviously, I don't want to pay fines. At the end of the thing, really, what I want to do after work is I want to be able to go home. I don't want to end up in jail because I couldn't stop. I don't want to go out of hospital because I couldn't stop. I want to go home.
Just finally, for a question for both of you, what would, in an ideal world, what would be a perfect working environment for Australian drivers on Australian roads?
I would say that drivers need to be paid a safe rate of pay, where they don't feel pressure to speed or cut corners, so they can go home to their family at the end of the day with a safe rate of pay, knowing that everyone on the road is safe around them.
And you, Dave?
It comes to the same old thing. I've got a home to go to. Okay, I don't want to work 12, 14, 16 hours a day. Fatigue is a big thing that I see in this day and age on our drivers. Also, a part of that is their own greed, because they're not, because of the pay they do get, it's running interstate and that sort of stuff, does need to be higher so they can afford to pay their bills. And that's part of the fatigue as well. They're working too long, and the people behind the desk are trying to get them to work longer. Okay, and that's down because there aren't enough drivers, and the reason there aren't enough drivers is because those of us that are in it would like to get out of it, and those of us who have sons and that just don't want them to join us.
Good words to finish on there. So, Sam and Dave, thank you very much for coming in and providing us with that insight.
Thanks, Jared.
Thank you, sir.
Sam McIntosh, Campaign Coordinator with the Transport Workers Union, and Dave Bleaching, very experienced truck driver.